Up here today being 4:23. So that's 3. Anybody else? Did I miss anybody else? That's it. Okay, here you go. 3. All right. You know the story, I'm sure, if you've attended Sunday school or church in the past. It's one of the great stories of the Bible. Daniel in the lion's den is one, but this one is equal to it, at least. And it's just a few chapters before it. This in Daniel 3, and the story of the lion's den is in Daniel 6. And this particular story has the Hebrew children, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and undoubtedly others beside, held hostage in Babylon, in the city of Babylon, the land of the Chaldeans, hostage against their will, so that the nations that had been conquered, including Judah, would be obedient to them and pay the taxes and the whatever tribute was laid upon them, while they had their sons. These were sons of the princes and so on, held captive in Babylon. They were sent to school so that they could learn the ways and the government of Babylon, and that they could serve as ministers to the various countries. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these 4 who were involved in the interpretation, the supernatural interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, were promoted, and they held places of great honor in the capital city itself. They were over the affairs of many of the people right in Babylon, while others were sent out to far off districts and over certain peoples and ethnic groups that were held captive there. These 4 had a very honorable position. Now the king, whose favorite god was a god named Evil Merodach, and you'll find that he often he names his sons according to the names of his god and so on. And if you read in the books in between Old and New Testament, which are not inspired like the 66 books of the Bible, but nonetheless are interesting, if you read in there, you'll find that there are some other interesting stories concerning Daniel and the gods of Babylon. But here at this point, Nebuchadnezzar, this great king with a big ego and big pride, one of the things that indicate his pride, besides the Bible story, which we'll come across in a few weeks, is the fact that every brick that was produced in Babylon had imprinted on it his initials, NBRZ or something like Nebuchadnezzar. And they still turn up bricks to this day. The archaeologists and those that go and dig there, they find bricks everywhere with his inscription on it. He wanted to be remembered as a builder, not only one who conquered, but he wanted to be remembered as the builder of a lasting empire. And then for one of his wives, he built, she liked the mountains, and here he was, they were in a plain, and she was homesick for the mountains. What should he do? He says, you want the mountains? I'll give you mountains. He built one. And he built it with a pump so that water would be pumped up to the top, and then the water would circle down. There were waterfalls and there were gardens all around this mountain. So when his favorite wife would get up in the morning, look out the window, she'd see the mountain with the waterfalls and so on. That became one of the wonders of the world, the hanging gardens of Nebuchadnezzar. That was built for one of his wives. And he was a builder. He had a big ego. He wanted people to remember him as a builder. But now he builds this great pedestal in the plain of Dura, and on top of the pedestal, the figure of a man, and a golden image. I doubt it was solid gold, but probably overlaid with gold. And he gets all his politicians, all those that served under him, sort of as a captive audience, to come to the plain of Dura, and there they were to worship his god. And he set up, got a lot of musicians, a lot of people there. If you read in this, it's really, it's not nice to read. It sort of sounds good. Let's see what it says in verse 7. Starting with verse 6. The threat that he made. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard, here it goes, here's his band, the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And if you read this again in verse 10, when they answer him, thou hast made a decree that every man shall hear when they hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music. I don't think dulcimer was in there the first time, was it? No. All right, they added the dulcimer here. And whoso falls not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And this is said so many times that you get to know the list by heart of all this music. But here they are, all these officials, from the dog catcher all the way up to the deputy to the king. They're all gathered in the plain of Dura, and here's this great, big, huge image. It tells us how tall it was. Was it 60 cubits high, which would be 90 feet high, and 6 cubits wide, which would be 9 feet wide. Great, big, huge image. And everybody's now waiting for the music to sound, and they're all going to bow down and worship. Mid-Eastern style of worship, to get on your knees and on your elbows and your forehead. And that's the normal form of their worship, 5-point landing. And so they all had to do that. They all had to get on their knees, their elbows and their forehead touch the ground, and do obeisance to this God. They're waiting and waiting, waiting, and all at once the downbeat, and hear the flute and the cornet and dulcimer and sackbutton and all the rest strike up, and everybody goes boom, right down they go. But here's three fellows standing there. Three fellows standing there. And were they disrespectful? What was their reason for standing bolt upright? The basic reason? Tell me, what was their basic reason for not bowing? The commandments. These were Jewish boys that had received, handed down from their parents and from their religious leaders, the commandments that were given at Mount Sinai, the first two of which, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not bow down or worship them. The second is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above or in the earth beneath. Thou shalt not bow down thyself nor worship them. So the very first two commandments had to do with recognizing no other God, and second of all, not making and recognizing, not making a graven image, a representation of anything, and recognizing that as a God. So they were on the solid ground of their very first two commandments that they had as a nation, serving the God who had delivered them from Egypt, who had miraculously brought them through the Red Sea, who had provided them a miraculous store of bread from heaven and water from a rock, and so on and so forth. All these wonderful provisions of the Lord were connected with this commandment that he had given them. Therefore, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And so they were on that ground. They refused to worship. Now, some guys came. They were undoubtedly somewhat jealous of the success that these three fellows had enjoyed, because they had been promoted at the time of the interpretation of the dream. And so there were plenty of volunteers to volunteer. You know what, King, there's three bad guys back there, and they didn't bow down. They didn't worship. Would you believe it? Isn't that awful? And what? The king was angry. This fellow, sort of intemperate. What do you read about him most? He's always threatening people. He's going to make their house into a dunghill and chop them in pieces. That was his way. And he threw more than one in the fire, beside breaking up their houses and making their house a dunghill and cutting them in pieces. But he threatened them, and now he was very angry to think that these fellows would not bow down. And he called for them. And he said to them, now, I'll give you another chance. I'm a very good guy. I'll give you another chance. We'll strike up the band one more time. And this time, if you bow down, all right, we'll forget about the past. But if you don't, I'm going to heat that furnace 7 times hotter than it was before. And they said, oh, king, we're not worried about our answer to thee. And this was something very basic that he said. And who is that God that will deliver you out of my hand? He threw down the gauntlet there, sort of, didn't he? Who is that God that will deliver you out of my hand? Oh, we're not careful to answer. We don't have to answer you now. You brought God into this picture. You want to know which God can deliver us? Our God, he will deliver us. But even if he didn't, we still wouldn't bow down. We want you to know that, O king. We're willing to die. But we believe our God will deliver us. Ooh, then he got mad. My, oh my. And he ordered that furnace to be heated 7 times hotter. No doubt they had some kind of a bellows, and they threw more fuel in. And so hot it was that when they actually took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they tied them up in their hats. It says in their hosen, in their hats and their hosen. I don't know how they tied their hats on, but I suspect they were turbans, you know. And then they threw them in, and the flames knocked down and destroyed those that threw them in. And then, after they had been thrown in, Nebuchadnezzar, he wants to see this show. So he comes out and he takes a look. What does he see? What do you think he expected to see? Sizzling, huh? He expected to see these poor fellas just curling up like bacon in the oven. But instead, what does he see? What did he see? He was astonished. I can just sort of picture his eyes getting big and being taken aback. And he says to the captains and so on, "Didn't we throw 3 men bound into the midst of this fiery furnace?" "Oh, King, you're right again. You're always right, King." He said, "How come I see 4 men walking loose in the midst of the burning fiery furnace? And the form of the 4th is like us." He doesn't say like we read here. Yes, dear.
You got the package for that lady?
Yes, it was downstairs on the chair right at the back. Ask Brother Richard. I had given it to Brother Richard.
I asked him, he wants to know where it is.
Well,
Anybody know where?
it was a white package down there. I'm sorry. Where is it?
I was right on the chair. I was sitting next to you. Where Joe was sitting.
Where Joe was sitting. It was right there.
Yeah, you put it under the chair.
It was delivered here by mistake. Well, at any rate, the king looked in there. Is that what I was saying?
Like the Son of God.
I was going to ask you about that. How come that the king said the form like the Son of Man? It almost sounds like Jesus. And how
Yes.
did he know about that?
Well, yeah, he didn't. The language there is the Hebrew language is the 4th is like a son of the gods. That's what he said literally. Not the Son of God, but like a son of the gods. He recognized that this form of the 4th was not just a natural human being, but it was something supernatural. The form of the 4th is different. Someone that can walk in the fire.
Excuse me. Do you have that box for that lady?
How many people I got to come? It was right there on that chair.
It's not there. She's here right now. That's what I'm asking.
Ask Joseph if he saw it, because it was right there.
All right, thank you.
All right? That's all right.
Here comes Joe.
So, at any rate, the 4th was like the Son of Man. Now, Brother Richard, who just stuck his head in the door, I should have had him tell you this, he found in the Septuagint, he read the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which is somewhat different from our text. He found in there that when Nebuchadnezzar looked in, not only did he see 4 men loose and walking, but he saw them praising God and singing in the midst of the fire. Now, it doesn't say that in King James Version, but in that old, the text that was translated from the original Hebrew into Greek for a fellow by the name of Ptolemy for his library. There in that text it says that they were singing and praising God in the midst of the fire. So when the king saw that, he called to them and he said, "Come out, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out." And they came out, and he marveled. And he did them honor. And he said, "There's no God that can deliver after this sort." And he praised them also. He says, "You're going to get promoted. And because you were willing to yield your bodies, and over whom the fire had no power." When they came out, nothing had been burned except the ropes that had bound them. And they didn't even have the smell of fire. Not a hair was singed. Now, I've had a little backflash from an oven once that came out on my face, and it melted off my eyebrows and singed the front hair here so that I looked a little funny for about 6 weeks from just a little fire. But here, these fellas have been cast into this terrible fiery furnace, and they came out alive with not any burns, with no smell of smoke upon them. That's more than you can say for some Christians. And also that they no singeing of their hair. And now they were delivered, and Nebuchadnezzar said, if anybody won't serve the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know what I'm going to do? Here it comes again. I'm going to smash your house, break down your house cut it in little pieces, and make cut you in little pieces and make your house a dunghill. That seems to be common to kings with great power. They want to do something to crush somebody. But now, the story is wonderful enough. All of us get into situations that are trials, sometimes even fiery trials, hard trials. This is perhaps the extreme test in the whole Bible, being cast in the fire. In the book of Isaiah, there's a verse that says, "When thou passest through the waters, they shall not overflow thee, and when thou goest through the fire, it shall not kindle upon thee." That's one of the promises. And then also at the end of the age, we read that the heavens shall be destroyed, the earth shall melt with fervent heat, the earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up but concerning the end of this age, the end of this world, and the second coming of the Lord, it says that we are not appointed unto wrath, but to obtain salvation. So that even though that's true that the world will be burned up, and did you hear that this week? How close an asteroid came to crashing into us? I'm glad it didn't turn left at the corner. But at any rate, you see, these things are within the realm of possibility. Whether man does it to himself with atomic weapons, or whether it's a natural disaster from the universe, from these bodies that are flying around in the universe, the end is forecast by the Lord. The heavens shall melt with a great noise, and pass away with a great noise, and the elements melt with fervent heat. And we are promised that we shall not be burned up, but that we shall have an eternal home. We're not going to a grave, a hole in the ground, but we're going to resurrection, just as surely as Jesus rose from the dead. And in a sense, these fellows came forth like out of a resurrection, or like with a resurrection. And their bodies could not be hurt by that fire. And God wants us to put our trust in him like these do. Now, I wrote down from a sermon by Charles Haddon Spurgeon, one of the great preachers of the last generation. 10 reasons why these fellows could have excused themselves from bowing down. You can think of some of them, can't you? Tell me a reason, one good reason. If you were Shadrach, Tony, what good rationalization, what reason could you have given why it was all right for you to bow down on this case? Oh, you couldn't. You would have been just like Shadrach, right? I think we all would have been, right? But what rationalization? Go ahead, Dolores. Tell us
Well,
one.
I think he could have said, well, the Lord put me here for a reason, so what would I burn up? So this
That's
is, I'll
exactly,
bow down,
sure.
So I could do good. I could do the Lord's will.
Sure, exactly. I think that's one of the very good. Undoubtedly, they could have used that with great effect upon many others who did bow down. They would have agreed. All right, another reason. What other reason do you think they might have given?
I'm sure they could have just rationalized and said, no, I'm sure God will understand.
Yes, sure.
He doesn't want them to burn up.
That's right. Okay. Well, another. Can you think of another excuse they might have used?
They could say that they didn't want to go against the law.
That's sure they could have. Oh, we're supposed to be submissive to the authorities. And anyway, I'm not bowing down to this fellow as a god. I'm just bowing down because you have to do that. And or they Haddon says they could have bowed down and said, "Oh, we're just bowing to the music. We're not bowing to the God." Well, you could have found many others. Let me just read a few of them. You know, they could have said it's useless to resist. Or they could have said, we're in a strange land. We can't be expected here to go by the rules that we would go back by in our own country. Or they could have said, well, we're in politics and we are here to serve our people. We can't serve our people if we're fried like bacon. We mustn't throw away our lives and throw away our chances. That would be a sin. They could have. These are all rationalizations that people could use. Oh, the image is only symbolic of our leader, of the king, and we know that's not a god. And so, what's the difference if we bow bow down before this thing or not? We know it's not a god. And furthermore, the king didn't say we have to repudiate all our other gods. He didn't say to deny any other god that you might worship. And let's see what else they might have done. Everybody that is anybody is doing it. Why should we think we're better than they are? And it's only once, and it's not for long. It's only for a couple seconds. What harm can it do? We can do more good alive than being burned. Well, we said that already. It's more than can be expected of us. Those were 10 of his reasons, and he had some other good points. But I think we ought also to see that while we are not called upon to bow down to an idol god, a Buddha, or some other fat-bellied, gold-covered idol, our government isn't about to compel us to do something like that. Nonetheless, society puts upon us pressure to conform to some of the worldly ways, and we ought not to be conformed to this world. There's the pressure of the standard of living. You know, our standard of living has gone up and up and up and up. And if you would travel in Southeast Asia, or if you would travel in India and see the poverty of the people, you would realize that the poor people, the lower middle class in this country, are like millionaires to those in India. And the poor people in this class, in this land, live like kings compared to many of the people over in Southeast Asia. We're well off. But here in America, it's never enough. And the standard of living is always going up, and for more cars and more status symbols and fancier furniture. And I remember the first time in Taiwan, I was impressed, or I at least noted how the people didn't care much about nice furniture. Then Sister Gerda told me why. She said nobody buys nice furniture here because every 2 years it gets flooded by one of those typhoons, and it's all ruined, and they have to throw it all away. So there's not much sense in buying a $1,000 couch because it's going to float away anyway. So in different places, but there's a pressure to conform. And then there's also the pressure. One of the idols, American idols, is education for the sake of education. Just to have more education. And yes, education is good. The Bible never says we shouldn't have any education. And we should have as much education as God wants us to have. But people make an idol of education. And they get too much knowledge. Like Ulrich Jelinek said, he was one who had a lot of education. He said we live in an age of specialization. And what that is, he says that's when you learn more and more about less and less, until finally you know everything about nothing. And that's education for the sake of education, for honors and for degrees. And we have the sports can be a god, style can be a god. These are things that there's pressure on us to conform to be involved in. The Lord wants us to come out from among them and be separate and touch not the unclean. The medical profession too. When you see how people honor the doctors, well, whatever the doctor says, and how often the doctors have been proven to be wrong and malpractice and whatnot all, and how often the remedies and the treatments have changed over the years. You're on shaky ground when you just put your blind trust in the doctors. Thank God for what they do and what they try to do. And some of them, of course, are very much motivated to help people. But I tell you, the Lord is motivated to help people too. And we have in the Word of God, is any sick among you? Let him pray. And let him call for the elders of the church. Let them pray. And so while we don't want to deny people their privilege to get medical help, we want to make sure that we understand that God has set up his own system and his own help for us, that as we trust in him, he heals and he does miracles. We have a wonderful Lord. So let's not bow down to every system that this world puts upon us. The peer pressure. Kids are especially subject to peer pressure. And they look the same, and they dress the same, and they talk the same, and they like the same things. God wants us to be willing to be a little different, to please God. Not just for the sake of attracting attention to ourselves and being different for that, but for the sake of doing that which is pleasing in God's sight. So I thank you for your good attention. And next week, let's just see what we go on to next week. We will not bow down. That was today. Next week, it is Nebuchadnezzar's pride abased. He loses his mind for a season of 7 years.